Hi, welcome to Iconoclasting with Sarah Smith, and I am your host, Sarah Smith. And today we are welcoming Lynzie Smith. Everybody gets shocked. This is not my sister or a distant relative, right? We just
That we
happen to
know
both
of, that
be,
we know
yeah, yeah,
of.
yeah. Yeah. We just happen to both be named Smith. I know it's very rare, but yes, Lynzie Smith, you are a community consultant on the show today. Do you want to tell us more about yourself, your company, everything?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I am the founder of Commonwealth Collective. We are a agency model focused on supporting women and female-led brands in building community. So I have a small team of consultants that support me around not just marketing, but also execution for events, retreats, online memberships, social content, everything that is required to be able to start, grow, and nurture a community.
That sounds so amazing, and I love that you focus on female founders, especially since, as we were recording this, it was just International Women's Day. Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
perfect.
definitely my background is in the beauty industry, so I worked with predominantly women as a stylist and makeup artist. I definitely felt a connection point to helping any female identifying person learn how to step into their power and who they are as a soul, and that really transferred over into this iteration of my professional career. I know we're going to talk about that a little more in the transition from beauty industry and hairstylist all the way over now to this spectrum of consulting and community growth. It's kind of a twisty turny journey, but for me as a woman myself, I feel really connected to being able to link arms and support other women in their mission.
I love that, and so let's get into it. How did you go from hairstylist and you said makeup artist? You actually said stylist. Is that different? Like, were you doing something more than hair? And I mean, obviously, you said makeup artist. What does that
Yeah, so
mean?
totally. So I was a hairstylist for almost 15 years. I still am licensed as a stylist. Last
Wow.
year, I kind of wrapped up doing pop ups back in Chicago where I built my business originally. So I would go back once a quarter and take some of my OG clients from time to time, but no more. From now on, I need to really be focused in on this iteration of my career. But I started out as a hairstylist behind the chair. So I worked in a commission salon right out of beauty school and moved to Chicago from Michigan, kind of established myself right out of the gate. And in that 4 years or so that I worked for someone, I also stepped into a niche space of working with texture. So I became an educator for an international hair care brand and taught classes on the technical skills around working with natural texture. And then that kind of expanded me into doing a lot of bridal and photo shoot work. So I was on set for different things, doing both hair and makeup. And then I started hosting workshops around the entrepreneurial side. I stepped into my own business in 2012. And what I realized is that my skill set behind the chair was strong. I was a strong technical stylist. I could perform the skills necessary for my clients really well, but the business side was my weakness. I was really lacking around the financial skill sets and the marketing skill sets and then the legal skill sets. So making sure I had contracts in place and I had my financial structure in place to be able to support me. And that fast forward became really, really important come 2020 with the pandemic. And so
Uh-huh.
in that, 8 or so year entrepreneurial journey, I learned a lot for myself to be able to grow my business. And then around 2016, I started hosting in person workshops for other beauty barber entrepreneurs. And I would facilitate bringing in a CPA or a marketing expert or somebody that could come and give us the education that we would maybe need to help advance our career. And so that for me was really passion led. I really loved the learning process of being able to build a business and do things more effectively and scale in a way that a lot of beauty entrepreneurs struggle to do because of how hands-on physically your career is. And so juggling all of those responsibilities can be really challenging. Fast forward in 2020, I had been working to build out a platform to shift the workshops that I had been facilitating in person in Chicago, meetups, workshops, networking. I wanted to shift
Uh-huh.
that into the online space. And we launched March 1st. And as you know, the pandemic hit, I think it was around March
Oh
15th,
my
St. Patrick's
goodness.
Day. So it was a
And
it
we're
was a
almost
wild.
there again as we're
Yeah, I
yeah,
know, it's
sorry. I
6
was like,
years,
wow,
6
6
years.
years later.
Yep, 6
That's
years later.
wild.
So in that transition, like everything obviously went virtual. Felt like I was building the plane and flying it at the same time. In my
That
mind,
must have
this
been
would be like,
insane.
it was insane. It was absolutely insane. I thought I would do this kind of on the side. It would be kind of a side project as I continued
Oh
with
my
the rest
gosh.
of my focus behind the chair. I was also, again, like I said, educating for a brand. In 2020, I had a ton of weddings contracted. So this was just
No.
supposed to be like a side project. This was just something I was going to do for fun, another business for fun. That was my mentality. And it just took off like a wildfire. So in the 4 or so months that my physical business was closed, I was doubling down on building this community through online webinars and memberships and the processes of figuring out PPP loans and SBA loans, everything that we needed as an industry. So I made a ton of connections. It just grew really quickly. But at that point, again, my revenue was coming from behind the chair, and that was shut off quite abruptly. And
Yeah.
so there was a big transition into figuring out, like, okay, how do I monetize this platform that I really had no idea I was ever going to monetize to begin with, and I had no concept of like building a community in that like mindset. So for
So
me,
you didn't plan to like, you didn't do this planning to monetize it?
I thought maybe at some point, I definitely thought like at some point there would be opportunities to monetize, but absolutely not at the onset. My intention at the onset was to be able to start building out education that was accessible. You know, I had created a really strong network
Mhm.
of hairstylists, makeup artists, barbers, entrepreneurs in the beauty field in Chicago locally. And I was wanting to now expand that to, again, in my mind, just the US. I just thought like
Yeah.
we would just start having some connection points in the US. And again, it's almost a fog to kind of look back
Mhm.
on the transition of how that all shifted and changed. But long story short, by October of 2020, I decided to step away from being behind the chair full time and go into building this out as a
Yeah.
business. I was able to then physically relocate outside of Chicago. I moved to Colorado for a while. And that was really something I never saw for myself. Being a hairstylist, I was geographically locked into Chicago in my
Yeah.
mind because my hairstylist clients all lived there.
Mhm.
The pandemic was just a huge trajectory shift. And fast forward, we facilitated in person events through 2021. 2022, we held our first 3-day summit in Dallas, Texas. I went through the process of learning how to pitch for sponsorship, keynote speakers, secure a venue, sell tickets, just all of
Yeah.
the processes that are necessary to be able to hold events.
Mhm.
And then after that event, one of the keynote speakers who was also a sponsor for that event, she is the founder of a SaaS tech company in the beauty space. And so she was my first lead into consulting. They hired me on a 6-month contract to come in to consult them around reducing their churn and getting their users activated in the community lens. And so that really put me on the path to building out now what is our agency model and helping other people facilitate community from my own trial and error, from the mistakes really that I made in that 2-3 year process of trying everything and overspending and throwing spaghetti at the
Yes.
wall, hoping that something would convert and work. I learned a lot in those hardships. And I feel like now I'm able to
Mhm.
use that wisdom to help others.
Gosh, you talk about overspending. I feel like I've spent on the dumbest stuff that I didn't need and was like, "What am I doing?" And then was like, "No, this is great. It's gonna help." It did not help. It did not help. So being like, that's one thing I can say is be a little bit more frugal and have somebody that can like talk some sense to you as a business owner when you're like, "I should buy this $1,000 thing."
There's so many in hindsight, obviously hindsight's always
Yeah.
2020, but
Yeah.
there was excessive overspending in my lens. And again, I was quite
Yeah.
successful financially as a hairstylist. And so in the onset, the early stages of everything, I had that revenue that I was able to then
Mhm.
just take the revenue that was coming in through my established successful business and put that into this community project, and
Mhm.
it was basically like, oh, no biggie, no problem. Like the money's here and I can just keep funneling it over.
Yeah.
So once I turned that revenue off, it was a shock to my system. And again,
I bet.
not having the financial skill set, not going through, traditional college programs or not having, my dad was an entrepreneur, also struggled with the financial
Mhm.
aspect of owning a business. And so it was a lot of trial and error. It still is. It still is. My personal finances have really held the burden of all of the
Yeah.
professional goals I've set for myself. And I'm still
Mhm.
cleaning up messes that I made in 2020, 2021, 2022. So it's an
Tell me
ongoing
about it.
process,
Yeah.
but I definitely think being able to kind of now help other entrepreneurs like skip the steps possibly around overspending, especially, and using more strategic approaches to creating community and doing it from a
Mhm.
lens of shifting away from just social media and labeling a large following on a social platform as a community, and instead actually
Mhm.
moving into like a really engaged connection point, a network of people that are really excited about whatever it is that you're doing.
Exactly, and that's one of the things I think is especially gonna be really big, and those are the waves that I don't know, tea leaves, the waves, whatever it is that I'm reading right now, is that it feels like there's we're continuing to want more community in our lives. And it could be online, it could be in person, but how are we building a community of sorts around us? And that accountability structures in, all of that into what we do, especially as entrepreneurs, especially as women. So it's so important what you're doing.
Yeah, community is such an asset. And I
Yeah.
relate that to entrepreneurship within our agency model. But even from a personal standpoint, I was raised in a very intense religion. And so I was brought up in an established community from the onset. And so,
Mhm.
for better or for worse, community has followed me through my life in different ways. And I'm very grateful to all the lessons I've learned around what a safe community really looks like, and how to,
Mhm.
if you do not have access to that, how to build that for yourself. And I think that's something,
Mhm.
as we continue down whatever's happening in the world and we start looking at, safe spaces for us to support each other, I think it's really a skill set that will expand far beyond business and entrepreneurship.
Mhm. So, and I wanna go back because did you say that you took a non-traditional pathway and didn't go to college? Is that right?
Yeah,
Or
I went
you
to,
did, like
yep,
go
yep, I
ahead,
did.
tell us more about that.
Sure, sure. I went, so my high school had an option for my senior year where I could do like a work program in
Mhm.
exchange for my high school credits. So my senior year, I worked at an insurance agency for half of my day,
Mhm.
and that was an incredible opportunity. The owner of the agency had actually offered at that time to help set me up for college and keep me
Cool.
within the agency structure. And I really considered that. Like I mentioned, my dad owned a business, blue
Mhm.
collar, definitely struggled with the financial side of entrepreneurship. And so at that stage of my life, 17 ish, 16, 17 years old, I wanted stability. I wanted
Yes.
benefits and insurance and 9 to 5, and yeah, just stability. The exact opposite of what I was raised with. And so that was my plan. I thought I would
Yeah.
continue that way. I ended up enrolling in community college after high school. The plan was to get my prerequisites done with community college, and then I would
Mhm.
continue in this kind of work exchange structure with the owner of the agency, and then go on to get my degree. And then I had one day, my job at the insurance agency was to do intakes. Someone would come in needing insurance, and I would sit down with them and get all their details. And then I would pass that on to the agent who would run the policies for them. This woman came in, and she was probably 22, maybe 23. And she
Yeah.
was so excited. She needed liability insurance. She had just gotten a job at a salon, and she was a hairstylist. And she just had this creative, bubbly excitement. And I remember like sitting across from her and just thinking like, man, I don't feel that way at all. There's like nothing about
Yeah.
me in my day to day and this career path that I feel lit up about. And I really
Yeah.
feel like that was kind of a trajectory shift for me right in that conversation, because it reminded me of an aunt of mine who also was in the beauty industry, who had that same pizzazz, for lack of a better word. She
Mhm.
just had that same kind of bubbly personality, and she was my fun aunt. She was the aunt I always kind of like looked to, still do in different ways, but she kind of set me on a shift. And so that afternoon, actually, during my lunch, I went to the local beauty school and I took a tour, got all the paperwork information from their finance department to figure out like what my student loan options would look like. And then by the end of that week, I put in my 2 weeks notice with the agency, and I enrolled in their next program. So I'm still like that, 37 years old. When I decide something, that's what we're doing, and we make
Yeah.
action happen quickly. So yeah, it was a really clear jump for me that I wanted to be in a career path that made me feel creative and excited and happy.
Mhm.
And then, I grew up in Michigan, like I said, small town.
Mhm.
And I knew like one of the barriers I wanted to overcome because I grew up with less financial stability than I would like.
Hmm.
I wanted to move to a big city to be able to give myself as many opportunities as possible to actually make a career out of a trade in a way that put me beyond that lower income level that most trade based businesses lend themselves to. So there was at least
Hmm.
an awareness for me around knowing that if I stayed in a smaller town, that the income threshold would be much lower versus moving to a major city and having more opportunity.
That's amazing. Like, what an amazing story, truly.
Those are the cliff notes. That's like the highlights. I feel like,
Well, right, right,
I'm like an onion. There's so many layers to
right.
all the reasons things happen. But yeah, from the positive side, that trajectory shift was crucial for me in my professional
Hmm.
development.
I love the idea of like, you're planning for optionality. That's so important. And it's something that I really enjoy. And there's something from like more of my career in Agile where it's called just in time planning, where it's like you've got these ideas and these frameworks, right? But you want to make a commitment as the last responsible time. So that's what it reminds me of. It's so cool to hear that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's like a little luck and a little grit, and I think
Yeah.
being able to just sort of recognize, for me at least, the struggle typically comes from indecision. And in my
Yes.
experience, the inability to make a decision is what sometimes holds me stuck. And so once I'm able to just make the decision and recognize that no matter the outcome, I'll be able to continue to evolve and grow and learn and shift, even with Commonwealth. I mean, again, we started out as independent beauty pros. That was the name of our
Hmm.
community initially. And so the iterations that happened between March 2020 and now March 2026 are countless, truly. I couldn't even really guess how many times we've had to pivot, shift. Myself, I've had to pivot,
Hmm.
shift. I've had to let go of attachments to a certain outcome. I've had to look for opportunities for revenue just to financially survive, just to keep myself ahead and being able to continue to move forward. That is not for the faint of heart. It's a difficult challenge to be able to kind of hold that inner faith and that trust that no matter what the outcome of this decision will be, I can navigate it and I can find the community, I can find the support, the resources that I need to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and I love that you said a little bit of luck, a little bit of grit. Sounds like first of all, that sounds like it'd be a great country song. But that's a lot of, you do planning and then you also have to pivot. You plan, you pivot, you do all of those things, especially as an entrepreneur. And like you were talking about, like you're chasing revenue goals, things that are going to be to keep you afloat, right? And sometimes you have to let go of those outcomes. I love that you said that. I usually ask my guests 1 to 3 things that you would recommend to somebody either going down like the non-traditional pathway, thinking about pivoting, anything that's like getting out of their comfort zone, anything you would tell them if they were coming to you for advice.
Yeah, have an anchor point. I think for me that's been something, especially again when we talk about community, it's not just the professional community that we build through business, through entrepreneurship, through careers, through networks. That's something I think, especially back in 2020, there was so much noise about networking and the importance of
Hmm.
networking and making those connections, which I obviously agree with. But at the same time, in the process of pivoting and shifting, I have had an anchor point to my true north, which is my value
Hmm.
system, my purpose, my beliefs around why I do any of what I do. And I think that anchor allows me to sometimes wander off a little, sometimes get a little in the weeds, if you will, but knowing
Yeah.
that I have that safety of recognizing that I have done the work to really know who I am and know why I'm on this path and why it's important to me to continue to move forward. It really helps, even from the mental health aspect. I think we've talked a little bit about
Hmm.
neurodivergence and recognizing that, sometimes as entrepreneurs, especially, or those who take the path less traveled, our brains work a little differently. And so being
They
able to
do.
have that anchor point helps me lean into some of the mess that comes up from learning in a different way. And for me, many, many times in this iteration process, I learn through perceived failure. I learn through challenge. And I'm working on adjusting that so that I can maybe learn in a more enjoyable way. But I think being able to have that anchor point,
Yeah.
whether that's family, friends, your value system, your belief system, your faith, whatever that is for you, I think that that's such an important thing to invest into, especially when you're in big chapters of transition.
That's such a good point too of like, yeah, what's going to keep you grounded. I know I've got some important people in my life going through some pretty big changes right now and it's a lot of waiting and waiting. And so it's like, okay, well, what can we do right now to keep us going as we wait on those particular outcomes or whatever we think we want. And somebody had told me a long time ago that normal is a setting on a dryer. It's not normal is it's not exactly something that we are. There's not really a normal person. So I love that you brought up the neurodivergence and diversity and everything like that. So this has been a wonderful conversation. Lindsay, where can we find you at? And I'm going to link it in the show notes as well. People want
Absolutely.
to connect
Um,
with you.
w- One of our easiest points of entry is through our monthly women's circles. So we facilitate women's circle. You can come to experience community firsthand. This is whether you're an entrepreneur or not, open to any female identifying person who wants to come and sit in community with other women who are navigating entrepreneurship, but just also life in general. Like you said, a lot of people are experiencing massive transition right now. And I think that will only continue this year. So that's a great point of entry to be able to come in and just get to know me and get to know our community space. And then I'm taking a bit of a social media break. All of my social media is focused on business, but my team is supporting that. And so for me, email is probably the best means of communication for now. And I kind of intend to keep it that way for a while. I think social spaces are
Beautiful.
again, like I said, just not the type of community I choose to invest my time into. So email's great, and our website is also a direct access point.
Okay, I love that. So thank you so much, Lindsay, my sister from a whole other set of parents, likely. So yeah, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.